So this is really fascinating. Douglas Murray is a vocal supporter of Israel and the Jewish people. I'm sure many of you watching this will have heard of him. He's not Jewish, but he studied these issues closely. And he's asked by a member of the audience at this JA21 meeting what he considers to be the root cause of anti-Semitism as someone that's been studying it very closely. And I want to show you his response. So here's the question first, then we'll show you his response because it's really interesting.
I've heard you talk a lot about the phenomenon of anti-Semitism in the world. I didn't hear anything about what causes anti-Semitism, and I think you need to know the cause in order to be able to fight it. Could you say something on that?
You asked the source. I mean, when I described anti-Semitism as a shapeshifter, I tried to explain the fact that in a way the source is so amorphous, it's very hard to pin down. If I had one thing that I would tie it down to very, very often, it's envy. Shirk wrote a great book about this in the 20th century, but envy is an extraordinarily deep human emotion, and again, ineradicable. Think of all of the anti-Semites across Europe in the past. So often it was envy. Envy that the Jews had the money, for instance. Envy of the idea that Jews had some access in society. Imagine what it's like for anyone in a country neighboring Israel. There are dozens and dozens of countries in the region which have Muslim Islamic governments of some kind. Most of them are run by sort of crime syndicate families, and they take all the money and the people don't get any money. Like if you go to a country in North Africa, as many of you will have done, you see these societies that have so much potential, and the potential is squashed out of people. You see young men hanging around the souk with nothing to do, no job prospects. And then this country emerges. It's re-established in 1948. And within one generation is this miracle. And a country with no oil, and Moses also found a country with no water, which somebody should have pointed out. It's very annoying. It makes life a lot easier if you have water. This country with no oil and no water goes on to be this magnificent success story in the Middle East. And then it has high tech. And it has a standard of living many times higher than that of its neighbors. And if you're a young man living in Jordan or Egypt, Lebanon, very easy, let alone West Bank or Gaza, why are they doing so well? And there's an additional one in Muslim anti-Semitism, which Bernard Lewis, among others, pointed out, which is, imagine what it's like if you've been told you've got the final revelation from God and the Jews are doing better than you. That's uncomfortable. So there's a lot of things it boils down to, but I would say envy is one of the deep, deep things in it.
I think what Douglas is saying is so spot on. He's nailed it, and it just shows that he really has studied it deeply. The point about envy, it's so interesting because I remember seeing that clip of Mohammed Hijab, who is a vocal and prominent anti-Israel activist and campaigner. And he was caught privately on camera saying, the problem is not with Zionists and Israel, it's actually with the Jews, it's with Judaism. Because the Jews think they're better than everyone. They think they're the chosen people. And it's so funny because isn't that exactly what Islam claims? Also Christianity too. They say we have, God forsook the Jews, or there's now a new covenant, and we're now the new chosen people, the new emissaries of God's message. So they say that too. In fact, they say that only with us can you get to heaven. Judaism never said that, never said you have to be Jewish in order to have a relationship with God or be in heaven or anything like that. But it's so interesting because that is the great crime. That is our great crime as Jews, that we're arrogant. Therefore, we need to be killed, slaughtered, destroyed. We have no right to exist. That's the issue. Seems a bit much. And if you think it's a nonsense claim, just shrug your shoulders and say, oh, they're just delusional. As Rabbi Manis Friedman said in an interview that I did with him a few months ago, it's not that we're arrogant. It's that the Jewish people have what to be arrogant about. Not that we are arrogant. In fact, every time we're asked if we're chosen, we're, we're all chosen to some extent, and we. The point is exactly what Douglas is touching on, because it's not just secular envy, but throughout history, it's also been a religious envy, where people know, including hijab, they know deep down that the Jewish people were chosen. We didn't do the choosing. God chose the Jewish people. And this is not a question of better or worse, superior or inferior, but it is a question of they were chosen for a particular mission, chosen in order to be God's voice to the world. And it's a mission that is eternal, and God has not given up on. And that's why it's also so threatening for them to see is the Jewish people return to their homeland, because it looks like, if they're scattered all over the world in exile, well then you can say, look, they're forsaken by God. But when they return to the land, that's very threatening, which is why they have to say it's an evil that must be destroyed. But the point is, this is just envy. And as Douglas said, it comes in all shapes and sizes, but it's so much of what's driving it is envy. And jealousy is a very, very toxic thing to have, because what it does is it stops you from actually seeing what you have as your particular mission, your particular blessings, the things that you can bring into this world. You end up focusing on everyone else. It's so interesting that it's actually one of the 10 commandments that God said at Mount Sinai, the 10th being, don't covet your neighbor's possessions, because what you have is what you need for your mission. So there's actually a chosen people within a chosen people. There's the Kohanim, the priests. And you don't see Jews being obsessively jealous and persecuting the Kohanim, the high priests, because we know that we all have our own unique mission, and so does every nation, every person. And so it's so stupid. It's so childish, but as Douglas said, it's so toxic, that jealousy. And so how do you deal with this envy and jealousy? Wanting to be what someone else is. Well, imagine if you were Einstein's brother, Albert Einstein's brother. Imagine all the attention is on Albert Einstein, and you're just jealous and you're envious and you're miserable, and it's so toxic. It's a disaster for you and for your brother, because you're both going to suffer in that relationship. What's the alternative, positive approach to jealousy? The alternative is pride. Pride that your brother is Albert Einstein. And yes, the nations of the world can have pride to have the Jewish people as a nation among them. And once you have that pride, you're then able to ask, how can I contribute? What is it that I've been blessed with in order for me to make an impact on this world? And potentially collaborate with my brother and do things that can help support him. And also, now that that envy has been removed, focus on what I can do to be productive and constructive. So Douglas is right. It's an unhelpful, it's an untrue emotion to have envy. Because if you're here, that's because you have a unique destiny and purpose. So to constantly stress about, well, why aren't I this person? Why aren't I part of that nation? Why don't I get... It's just so futile, but it's caused so much bloodshed. And it really is the root of so much pain and anti-Semitism that's occurred throughout history. So Douglas is right. This is the root cause, and this is what needs to be addressed. And there's no use us trying to deny our chosenness or to deny our remarkable, miraculous history. Because the way that the world comes to peace and blessing and goodness is not by us trying to suppress and deny God's plan. It's by everyone getting on board with it. I'm Ollie Annisfeld, and you're watching JTV. Thank you so much for watching. To watch another one, click here. To stay up to date with all our content, click here to subscribe. And if you're able to, you can help support JTV to grow and grow by clicking join below this video, where you can become a member and get perks including early access to videos and private live discussions with me. But most of all, you'll be partnering with us on our mission to change the world.